listening to the EPT Works Listen, Love, Give podcast. Hi, I'm Dr. Annette Cargioli, the Forgiveness Doctor. I'm here to help you create phenomenal health, happiness, and new life with energy, intuition, and forgiveness. EPT is short for Emotional Polarity Technique, an innovative, holistic emotional therapy that will change your life for good. You can subscribe to this podcast, get free EPT training at eptworks.com, and like us on Facebook. A study of nearly 4,000 men and women revealed that 32% of men and 23% of women typically kept their feelings bottled up during marital spats. Women who didn't speak their minds in those fights were 4 times more likely to die during the 10-year study period as women who always spoke their minds. In fact, self-silencing takes a surprising physical toll on women. Other studies have linked the trait to numerous psychological and physical health risks, including depression, eating disorders, and heart disease. Additionally, the way you interact during marriage arguments is as important a heart risk factor as whether you smoke or have high cholesterol. For women, whether her husband's arguing style is warm or hostile had the biggest impact on her health. Interestingly, the level of warmth or hostility had no impact on men's heart health. Instead, the men's heart risk increased if disagreements with his wife involved a battle for control, regardless of whether he or his wife was the one vying for the control. Another study that evaluated 600 women between the ages of 30 and 65 over the course of 10 years revealed that loving and healthy relationships had a positive influence on the way the heart functioned. In this podcast titled Healing Abuse, you will learn how to spot abuse in a client, how to handle a client who is in an abusive relationship, why abuse and chronic illness usually go together, and how EPT can help empower those who are in abusive relationships to make the best possible decisions for their life. Women in abusive relationships are usually chronically, physically, or emotionally ill. Helping these women to understand that what they are going through is real and many times actually textbook. This can support them in making decisions for themselves to improve their life and their health. Women with chronic illness, both physical and mental, are usually under the influence of an abusive relationship. Lundy Bancroft wrote a book called Why Does He Do That? Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men. In this podcast, I'll be sharing critical notes from his book. These are the notes I share with any clients that I suspect may be involved in an abusive relationship. I never call someone's partner abusive. I share these notes from Lundy Bancroft's book, and I ask my client to tell me if their partner is abusive. In these notes, we're going to cover what is abuse, what is an abusive mentality, and what does that look like, 10 realities of an abuser, 10 reasons an abuser stays that way, and clear signs of an abuser that is not changing anytime soon. So here we go with Lundy Bancroft's notes from the book, Why Does He Do That? Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men. The word abuse has different meanings to different people. Most people think of chronic physical or verbal assault as the best definition of abuse. People who have endured extreme physical or verbal assault as children are more likely to attach the word abuse to the extreme or obvious physical and emotional trauma. Culturally, we hesitate to call a relationship abusive unless there is certain evidence of this extreme trauma existing in the relationship. I am using the word abuse in this context to apply to any man or woman who has recurring problems with the following: disrespecting, controlling, insulting, or devaluing his partner, whether or not his behavior also involves more explicit verbal abuse, physical aggression, or sexual mistreatment. Controlling men run a gamut in their attitudes, from those who are willing to accept confrontation about their behaviors and strive to change them, to those who won't listen to the woman's perspective at all, and they feel completely justified and become highly retaliatory if she attempts in any way to stand up for herself. Any of these behaviors can have a serious impact on a woman's life and her health, and can lead her to feel totally confused, depressed, anxiety-ridden, or afraid. When working with women who are falling apart with confusion, depression, anxiety, and fear, and usually a handful of chronic health issues, it's important to understand the relationship dynamics of an abusive relationship. Men who have this problem of chronic anger, disrespect, and control may or may not be victims themselves of abuse. But this is not their main problem. The problem that consumes angry, controlling men is their thinking. Here's some of the things you may say or hear yourself say if you are under the influence of the abusive mentality. His attitude always seems to be, "You owe me." I feel suffocated by him. He's trying to run my life. He manages to twist everything around so that it's always my fault. Everyone seems to think he's the greatest guy in the world. I wish they could see the side of him that I have to live with. He says he loves me so much, so why does he treat me like this? 10 realities about abusers. Reality number 1, he is controlling. An argument should only last as long as my patience does. Once I've had enough, the discussion is over and it's time for you to shut up. If the issue we're struggling over is important to me, I should get what I want. If you don't back off, you're wronging me. I know what is best for you and for our relationship. If you continue disagreeing with me after I've made it clear which path is the right one, you're an idiot. If my control and authority seem to be slipping, I have the right to take steps to reestablish the rule of my will, including abuse, if that's what's necessary to get you in line. Reality number 2, the abuser feels entitled. Entitlement is the abuser's belief that he has special status and that it provides him with exclusive rights and privileges that do not apply to his partner. The attitudes that drive abuse can largely be summarized by this one word: entitled. The abusive man awards himself all kinds of rights, including the following: physical caretaking. He expects his partner to do the majority of the house and kids stuff the way he likes it, while he constantly criticizes, complains, and insults. Emotional caretaking. He feels entitled that his needs are your responsibility, and your needs are your responsibility. Sexual caretaking. He considers it his partner's duty to keep him sexually satisfied, He may not accept having his sexual advances rejected, yet turn you down whenever he feels like it. Deference. His unstated rule that she is not to question any of his ideas. Freedom from accountability. He believes he should be permitted to ignore the damage his behavior is causing, and he may become retaliatory if anyone tries to get him to take a real look at it. The abusive man's problem with anger is almost the opposite of what is commonly believed. The reality is, your abusive partner doesn't have a problem with his anger. He has a problem with your anger. One of the basic human rights he takes away from his partner is the right to be angry with him. No matter how badly he treats his partner, he believes her voice shouldn't rise and her blood shouldn't boil. The privilege of rage is reserved for him alone. When anger does jump out of his partner, as will happen to any abused woman from time to time, he is likely to try to jam it back down your throat as quickly as he can. Then he will use that anger to prove what an irrational person his partner is. Women in these relationships develop physical and emotional reactions to swallowing their anger, such as depression, nightmares, emotional numbing, eating and sleeping problems, and a myriad of chronic physical complaints. It is common for the abusive man to then use these problems in his partner to further belittle her and make her feel crazy. Once you grasp the nature of entitlement, the following concept about the abusive man becomes clear. He isn't abusive because he is angry. He's angry because he is abusive. It wouldn't do any good to send an abuser to an anger management program because his entitlements would just keep producing more anger. His attitudes are what need to change. Reality number 3 about an abusive man. He twists things into their opposites. The abuser's highly entitled perceptual system causes him to mentally reverse aggression and self-defense. The lens of entitlement the abuser holds over his eye stands everything on its head like a reflection in a spoon. An abuser says, "You're saying I should lie down and let her walk all over me," because he is told he is intimidating his partner and is unacceptable no matter his intimidation is unacceptable no matter how angry he is. He says, "So you're telling us that my partner can do anything she wants to me and I'm not allowed to lift a finger to defend myself?" Just because his partner told him that she was sick of his friends trashing the house and that he should clean up his own mess, when he was told there was no excuse to call her a disgusting name. He says, "Your approach is that whatever she does is okay because she's a woman, but because I'm a man, there's much stricter rules for me." The abusive man has another reason to exaggerate and ridicule his partner's statements, and even his counselor's statements. He wants to avoid having to think seriously about what she is saying and to struggle to digest it. He feels entitled to just swat her down like a fly instead. Reality number 4 about the abusive man. He disrespects his partner and considers himself superior to her. He often has difficulty conceiving of her as an actual human being. This tendency in abusers is known as objectification or depersonalization. Most abusers verbally attack their partners in degrading, revolting ways. They reach for words that they know are most disturbing to women, such as bitch or whore, often preceded by the word fat. These words assault her humanity, reducing her to an animal, a non-living object, or a degraded sexual body part. By the use of the most degrading word they can think of, abusers make their partners feel both debased and unsafe. Objectification is a critical reason why an abuser tends to get worse over time. As his conscience adapts to one level of cruelty or violence, he builds to the next. By depersonalizing his partner, the abuser protects himself from the natural human emotions of guilt and empathy so that he can sleep at night with a clear conscience. He distances himself so far from her humanity that her feelings no longer count or simply cease to exist. The walls tend to grow over time so that after a few years in a relationship, abusers can reach a point where they feel no more guilt over degrading or threatening their partners than you or I would feel after angrily kicking a stone in the driveway. Abuse and respect are diametric opposites. You do not respect someone whom you abuse, and you do not abuse someone whom you respect. Reality number 5 of the abusive man. He confuses love and abuse. An abusive man often tries to convince his partner that his mistreatment of her is proof of how deeply he cares. But the reality is that abuse is the opposite of love. The more a man abuses, the more he is demonstrating that he cares only about himself. He may feel a powerful desire to receive your love and caretaking, but he only wants to give love when it's convenient for him. When an abusive man feels the powerful stirring inside that other people call love, he is probably largely feeling the desire to have you devote your life to keeping him happy with no outside interference. The desire to have sexual access, the desire to impress others by having you be his partner, and the desire to possess and control you. Genuine love means respecting the humanity of the other person, wanting what is best for him or her, and supporting the other person's self-esteem and independence. This kind of love is incompatible with abuse and coercion. Reality number 6 of an abusive man, he is manipulative. Few abusive men rely entirely on verbal abuse or intimidation to control their partners. Being a nonstop bully is too much work, and it makes the man look bad. If he is abusive all the time, his partner starts to recognize that she's being abused. And the man may feel too guilty about his behavior. The abuser, therefore, tends to switch frequently to manipulating his partner to get what he wants. He may sometimes use these tactics just to get her upset or confused. There are some signs of manipulation by abusers that you can watch for. One sign would be he changes his mood abruptly and frequently, so that you find it difficult to tell who he is or how he feels, keeping you constantly off balance. His feelings towards you are especially changeable. Another sign of manipulation is him denying the obvious about what he is doing or feeling. He'll speak to you with his voice trembling with anger, or he'll blame a difficulty on you, or he'll sulk for 2 hours and then deny it to your face. You know what he did, and so does he. But he refuses to admit it, which can drive you crazy with frustration. Then he may call you irrational for getting so upset by his denial. He may try to convince you that he wants to do what's best for you. This way, the abuser can make his selfishness look like generosity. He may try to get you to feel sorry for him so that you will be reluctant to push forward with your complaints about what he does. He may try to get you to blame yourself or blame other people for what he does. He may use confusion tactics in arguments, subtly or overtly changing the subject, insisting that you are thinking or feeling things that aren't, twisting your words, and many other tactics that serve as glue to pour into your brain. You may leave arguments with him feeling like you are losing your mind. He may lie or mislead you about his actions, his desires, or his reasons for doing certain things in order to guide you into doing what he wants you to do. He may get you and the people you care about turned against each other by betraying confidences, being rude to your friends, telling people lies about what you supposedly said about them, charming your friends and telling them bad things about you, and many other divisive tactics. In some ways, manipulation is worse than overt abuse, especially when the two are mixed together. When a woman gets called a bitch or gets shoved or slapped or beaten, at least she knows what her partner did to her. But after manipulative interaction, she may have little idea what went wrong. She just knows that she feels terrible or crazy and that somehow it seems always to be her fault. Reality number 7 about the abusive man. He strives to have a good public image. These guys look great. Women who are involved with an abusive man spend a lot of time trying to figure out what is wrong with me rather than what is wrong with him. She spends so much of her energy in her own head, spinning her mind and her thoughts trying to figure out what she could do to please him, what she's doing that's wrong, how she can make herself better, while he doesn't spend 1 second thinking about how to be better in the relationship. If he gets along well with other people and impresses them with his generosity, sense of humor, and friendliness, she may wonder, what is it about me that sets him off? Other people seem to think he's great. He's really a nice guy. Why do I set him off? Most abusive men put on a charming face for their communities, creating a sharp split between their public image and their private treatment of women and children. He might be enraged at home, but calm and smiling outside of the house. He may be selfish and self-centered with you, but generous and supportive with everybody else. He may be domineering at home, but willing to negotiate and compromise in outside situations. He may be highly negative about females while on his own turf, but a vocal supporter of equality when anyone else is listening. He may be assaultive toward his partner or children, but non-violent and non-threatening with anyone else. He may act entitled at home, but critical of other men who disrespect or assault or mistreat women. Abusive men do not have split personalities. They do not have a mental disorder. They are drawn to power and control, and part of how they get it is by looking good in public. The abusive man's charm makes his partner reluctant to reach out for support or assistance because she feels that people will find her revelations hard to believe or will blame her. Observers think, he's such a nice guy. He's just not the type to be abusive. She must have problems, or she must have hurt him really bad. Although these men usually keep their abusive side well hidden outside of the home, there is one situation in which it slips out. When someone confronts them about their abusiveness and sticks up for the abused woman, suddenly the attitudes and tactics they normally reserve for home come pouring out. The vast majority of women who say they are being abused are telling the truth. Reality number 8 about the abusive man. He feels justified about his abuse. Abusers externalize responsibility for their actions, believing that their partners make them behave in abusive ways. Many abusive men express guilt or remorse when they first begin attending counseling. They say they really want it better and they're sorry for what they've done. But as soon as they are pressed to look at their histories of abusive behavior, they switch back to defending their actions. They don't mind saying, I know what I did was wrong, but when asked to describe their verbal or physical assaults in great detail, they leap back to justifying why it was all right for them to do what they did. Abusive men are masters of excuse making. In this respect, they're like substance abusers who believe that everyone and everything except them is responsible for their actions. When they aren't blaming their partners, they blame stress, alcohol, their childhood, their children, their bosses, or their own insecurities. More important, they feel entitled to make these excuses. When it's pointed out that other men under the same pressures choose not to be abusive, they tend to become irate or contemptuous. Most abusers do have a conscience about their behavior outside the family. They may be willing to be answerable for their actions at work, at the club, or on the street, or at church. Home, however, their sense of entitlement takes over. The abusive man commonly believes he can blame his partner for anything that goes wrong, not just his abusiveness. Did he just suffer a disappointment? She caused it. Is he embarrassed by a mistake he made? She should have prevented it. Is one of the children in a difficult period? She's a bad mother. Everything is someone else's fault, and that someone else is usually her. Reality number 9 of the abusive man. Abusers deny and minimize their abuse. If the abuser were ready to accept responsibility for his actions and relationships, he wouldn't be abusive. Breaking through denial and minimization is one of the main tasks facing an abuse counselor. Most abusive men admit to some abusive behavior, although they don't see it as abusive, of course. But they acknowledge only a small portion of what they have actually done and how they have hurt someone or made them feel like nothing. A woman can feel that she is losing her mind or develop psychiatric symptoms if the obvious realities of her life, including abuse, being put down, being criticized, and minimized, are denied repeatedly by her partner, who may say, "No, you're taking this way too harshly. I did not call you stupid. I never called you stupid." When this is denied the obvious realities that are happening, the certainty and authority in his voice, with his eyes twisted up to show how baffled he is, it leaves her questioning herself. Did it really happen? Maybe it didn't. Maybe I do overreact to innocent things. The more serious the incidents he denies, the more her grip on reality can start to slip. And if outsiders start to notice her instability, the abuser can use their observations to persuade them that her revelations of abuse by him are just fantasies in her mind. Reality number 10 of the abusive man. Abusers are possessive. The sense of ownership is one reason why abuse tends to get worse as relationships get more serious. The more history and commitment that develop in the couple, the more the abuser comes to think of his partner as a prized object. Possessiveness is at the core of the abuser's mindset, the spring from which all the other streams spout. On some level, he feels that he owns you, and therefore he has the right to treat you any way he sees fit. Keep the word ownership in mind. Abusive men come in every personality type, arise from good childhoods and bad ones. They are macho men or gentle, quiet, liberated men. There is no psychological test that can distinguish an abusive man from a respectful one. Abusiveness is not a product of a man's emotional injuries or of deficits in his skills. In reality, abuse springs from a man's early cultural training, his key male role models, and his peer influences. In other words, abuse is a problem of values, not a problem of psychology. When someone challenges an abuser's attitudes and beliefs, he tends to reveal the contemptuous and insulting personality that normally stays hidden, reserved for private attacks on his partner. An abuser tries to keep everybody, his partner, his therapist, his friends and relatives, focused on how he feels. So they won't focus on how he thinks. Perhaps because on some level he is aware that if you grasp the true nature of his problem is his thinking, then you will escape his domination. Now, we're going to talk about 10 reasons an abuser stays that way. You know, somebody is abusive and you wonder, what is it going to take for them to change and why? You know, what is the benefit for them to remain an abuser? The first reason an abuser stays that way is just the intrinsic satisfaction of power and control. The feeling that he rules is where his pleasure lies. The second reason an abuser stays that way, he likes getting his way, especially when it matters to him most. Happiness in a relationship depends greatly on your ability to get your needs heard and taken seriously. If these decisions are taken over by an abusive or controlling partner, you experience disappointment after disappointment, the constant sacrificing of your own needs. The third reason an abuser stays that way, he wants someone to take his problems out on. He considers himself entitled to use his partner as a kind of human garbage dump where he can litter the ordinary pains and frustrations that life brings us. She is always an available target. She is easy to blame since no partner is perfect, and she can't prevent him from dumping because he will get even worse if she tries. His excuse when he jettisons his distresses onto her is that his life is unusually painful or difficult. An unacceptable rationalization, even if it were true, which it generally isn't. The fourth reason an abuser stays that way is because he gets free labor from her, leisure and freedom for himself. Studies have shown that a majority of women feel that their male partners don't contribute fairly to household responsibilities. However, a woman whose partner is not abusive at least has the option to put her foot down about her workload and insist that the man pick up the slack. With an abusive man, however, if you put your foot down, he either ignores you or makes you pay. The fifth reason an abuser stays that way, he likes being the center of attention with priority given to his needs. When a woman's partner chronically mistreats her, what fills up her thoughts? Him. She ponders how to soothe him so that he won't explode, how to improve herself in his eyes, how she might delicately raise a touchy issue with him. The entire family strives to enhance his good moods and fix his bad ones in the hope he won't start tearing pieces out of anyone. Consistently at the center of attention and getting his own way, the abuser can ensure that his emotional needs get met on his terms, a luxury he does not want to part with. Another reason an abuser stays that way is just simply financial control. The seventh reason he stays that way is to ensure that his career, education, and other goals are prioritized. Closely interwoven with financial control is the question of whose personal goals receive priority. Her own goals may also advance at times, but only as long as they don't interfere with his. The eighth reason an abuser stays that way, he likes public status of having a partner or being a father without all the sacrifices. With his strong people-pleasing skills and his lively energy when under the public gaze, he soaks up the smiles and appreciations he receives from relatives, neighbors, and people in the street who are unaware of his behavior in private. The ninth reason an abuser stays that way: he likes the approval of his friends and relatives. An abuser often chooses friends who are supportive of abusive attitudes. On top of that, he may come from an abusive family. In fact, his father or stepfather may have been his key role model for how to treat female partners. If these are his social surroundings, he gets strokes for knowing how to control his partner, for putting her in her place from time to time, and for ridiculing her complaints about him. For this man to renounce abuse, he would have to give up his cheerleading squad altogether. Finally, the last reason that an abuser stays that way: he has double standards. An abusive man subtly or overtly imposes a system in which he is exempt from the rules and standards that he applies to you or anyone else. He may allow himself to have occasional affairs because men have their needs, but if you so much as gaze at another man, you're a whore. He may scream in arguments, but if you raise your voice, you're hysterical and out of line. He may pick up one of your children by the ear, but if you grab your son and put him in time out for punching you in the leg, you're a child abuser. He can leave his schedule open and flexible while you have to account for your time. He can point out your faults while setting himself above criticism so that he doesn't have to deal with the complaints you have about him or be confronted with the effects of his selfish and destructive actions. The abusive man has the privilege of living by a special set of criteria that were designed for him, and because of that, he does not want to stop being an abuser. Now, when you start working with someone, they want to know, I think my abusive man is changing. We've been going to a counselor and I think he's changing. So here are the clear signs of an abuser who is not changing. He says he can change only if you change too. He says he can change only if you help him change by giving him emotional support, reassurance, and forgiveness, and by spending a lot of time with him. This often means that he wants you to abandon any plans you had to take a break from seeing him. He criticizes you for not realizing how much he has changed. He criticizes you for not trusting that his change will last. He criticizes you for considering him capable of behaving abusively, even though he has in fact been abusive in the past and has continually threatened to be abusive, as if you should know that he would never do something like that, even though he has. He reminds you about the bad things he would have done in the past, but isn't doing anymore, which amounts to a subtle threat. He tells you that you are taking way too long to make up your mind and he can't wait forever, as a way to pressure you not to take all the time you need to collect yourself and to assess how much he's really willing to change. He says, I'm changing, but you don't feel it. Here's some additional thoughts from Lundy Bancroft's book. Therapy for the abusive man focuses on the man's feelings and gives him empathy and support, no matter how unreasonable the attitudes that are giving rise to those feelings. A more healing approach must stop focusing on the man's feelings and start focusing on his thinking. The feelings that the abusive man should discuss in therapy are primarily his partner's feelings. How has his behavior made her feel? How has his behavior made his children feel? Not focusing on how he feels or how she's made him feel. So did you get that? When you have one of these men in front of you, or if you are married to a man like this, the only kind of therapy that's going to be effective is therapy that focuses his mind on talking about and thinking about the feelings that he brings up in the people that he abuses. He has to say in detail exactly how he hit her, how he demeaned her, how he was critical to her, what exactly were the names he called her. Bitch, fatty, idiot, stupid. What were the names he called her? He has to come to terms with talking about the details of his own behavior, and the feelings he needs to talk about are the feelings in the people he has hurt and mistreated. The abusive man's belief that his own needs should come ahead of his partner's is the core of his problem. That his feelings are the only ones that matter is the core of his problems. And when in counseling and therapy, the focus is on his feelings over the feelings of the people he has abused, he won't heal. Those abusive men who make lasting changes are the ones who do so because they come to realize how badly they are hurting their partners and children. In other words, they learn to care about what is good for others in the family and develop empathy instead of caring only about themselves and what they need and about what they're feeling and about what they're going through. In a previous podcast that I did, I believe it was podcast number 15 about toxic relationships. And I'm speaking there about people who have been very severely hurt in childhood, but as they grow up, they are so angry about not being protected that they take advantage of people and they actually expect more. So they use the abuse that happened to them in their childhood as an entitlement to extra special treatment. Now, I bring this up because this is a kind of a rare situation, but it can show up, where a man who has this abusive pattern marries or partners with a woman who may have this victimization entitlement. Now, what that means is it's going to be really hard to get the two of them out of this pattern because both of them have to give up their entitlement. Now, for the wife who is being abused by this man and treated wrongly because she uses or feeds on bad treatment as her entitlement to be given more in a relationship, to get to have the upper hand, to have any power, then she can corner him into always having to deal the abuse out to her because she is feeding, getting her power out of his abuse, her reason why she deserves more and why she can do whatever it is she does in the relationship and why he will never be able to heal because she needs him to be abusive because that's where she sources her power and her entitlement. So if you're confused about this, you can go back and listen to the podcast on toxic relationships where I talk about that form of entitlement in people who have been severely abused. The abuse I'm talking about here does not necessarily mean it's a man who has been severely abused. It's a man who's been influenced by his role models in how they treat women. So this is the difference. But when you get two people in a relationship and one is a victim who is entitled and one is an abusive person who is superior and entitled, this is a really tough situation to heal. And you just need to be aware that it can exist. So you're not pulling your hair out and wondering, wait a minute, what's going on? Now, the way I feel you have to approach that situation is to find out if the victim is willing to let go of her entitlement to make him hurt and squirm and pay a big price because he has hurt her more than he should have. And that is where I would be focusing to see if she's willing to give that up, because she would have to give that up before this man would ever have the space to actually give up his entitlement and stop abusing. So I just want to put that in there. Now, how can EPT support healing abuse? Long before I learned this well-researched and documented information on abuse, I was helping women and men, mostly women, but I have helped some men who've been in these abusive relationships as well, who were dealing with these problems. EPT is a healing tool that simply opens the heart to allow people, all people, to love more. Even though I was ignorant of the patterns of abuse that Lundy Bancroft skillfully and compassionately teaches in his book, I witnessed the healing of an abusive man who, through EPT and God, was able to empathize with the family he had abused for so many years. As a result, his capacity to love more expanded, and his loving, respectful treatment of his family increased greatly. I have also helped hundreds of women and children who have experienced physical or emotional oppression, had lost their God-given sense of self and power. EPT helps victims reclaim their power and increase their ability to love themselves without hurting others or giving up their own power ever again. When a human being is denied the right to have needs or to express their needs in a relationship, physical and emotional sickness is the result. Most people you will work with come to you because they have physical or emotional sickness. You will give them relief using EPT. Understanding and knowing the patterns of abuse, oppression, and victimization will help you to realize when that pattern is part of the picture so that you can be a better counsel to your client. Understanding these patterns will also help you with more specific forgiveness statements. The woman or man who has been hurt in an abusive relationship needs to be reminded that she is a real person with her right to her own thoughts, ideas, and opinions. In a relationship, both people should feel safe to hold their own thoughts, ideas, and opinions without the fear of being treated with disrespect or dishonor. Whether you are in an abusive relationship now or you have been in one in the past, EPT can help you to heal and reclaim your power to love others without giving up the power to love yourself. You need to know that you can heal from abuse that's happening right now or abuse that's in the past. EPT is a holistic emotional therapy that uses energy, intuition, and forgiveness to release not only the failure, hurt, and self-hatred, but to release the energy you hold in your body and in your inner world. Releasing this allows your body to heal, your mind to think more clearly so you can make better decisions for you, your children, and your future. May you come to know that you are a valued child of God. May you feel free to open your heart to receive real love from others, love that doesn't come with control or abuse. May you begin to love yourself more and accept you are here to be loved, and you deserve to be loved by others. As always, you can subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and go get your free training at eptworks.com. I'm Dr. Annette Cargioli, the Forgiveness Doctor. Until next time, listen, love, give. EPT works.